The scent hit me first, iron and earth and something darker, something that made my wolf recoil, even as my human half leaned forward. I stood at the edge of the ceremonial hall, my fingers white-knuckled around the silver tray of wine glasses I'd been instructed to serve, watching as Alpha King's hand slid possessively around another woman's waist. 10 years. 10 years of being his secret, his shame, his mistake. And tonight, under the chandeliers dripping with crystal and the watchful eyes of every pack in the Northern Territories, he was announcing his engagement to someone else. The air tasted like betrayal, thick and cloying, coating my tongue until I thought I might choke on it. My wolf whimpered somewhere deep in my chest, a sound only I could hear, a sound that had become as familiar as breathing. She'd been whimpering for a decade now, ever since that night when Cade had marked me in a frenzy of heat and instinct, then looked at me with horror dawning in his amber eyes. "You can't tell anyone," he'd said, his voice still rough from our joining, his scent still all over my skin. An Omega. God, Isla, you're an Omega. Do you understand what that means? I understood. I understood that his father would never accept it. I understood that the pack's legacy, built on the backs of alphas and their carefully chosen mates, would crumble if their future leader bound himself to the lowest-ranking wolf in the hierarchy. Quick question. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. I love seeing where my pack is scattered across the world. So I'd stayed silent. I'd moved into the servants' quarters. I'd learned to keep my eyes down and my scent suppressed, wrapping myself in bitter herbs and resignation until even my own wolf couldn't recognize what we'd once been. And Cade had learned to look through me as if I were made of glass, as if that night had never happened, as if the mark on my shoulder blade didn't pulse with phantom heat every time he walked past. Tonight was supposed to be my breaking point. I'd planned it all out. I would serve the wine with steady hands. I would watch him pledge himself to Celeste Thorne, a beta from a powerful family, acceptable, dignified, everything an alpha's mate should be, and then I would disappear. There were rumors of packs in the far south that didn't care about rank, places where omegas could exist without apology. I'd saved enough to make the journey. I'd written my goodbye in the careful script my grandmother had taught me before she passed, leaving nothing unsaid except his name. But I hadn't accounted for him. The rival Alpha King arrived like a storm breaking over calm water. The massive oak doors at the hall's entrance slammed open with enough force to rattle the ancient hinges, and suddenly the air changed. It went from stifling to electric in a heartbeat, charged with a power that made every wolf in attendance snap to attention. I felt it in my bones, in the marrow, Algi's presence so overwhelming that my suppressed omega nature surged to the surface despite years of careful control. He filled the doorway like he'd been carved from shadow and starlight, taller than Cade by half a head, broader through the shoulders, with hair the color of midnight that fell past his collar in a way that should have looked uncivilized, but instead seemed regal. His eyes, God, his eyes were silver, actual metallic silver, like moonlight given form and fury. They swept the room with predatory precision, cataloging threats and weaknesses in the space of a breath. And then they found me. Everything stopped. The conversations, the music, the beating of my own heart, all of it suspended in that terrible, infinite moment when our gazes locked across the crowded hall. His nostrils flared. I watched it happen, watched him draw in the scent of the room, sorting through champagne and expensive perfume and the musk of 100 different wolves until he found mine. The herb-wrapped, carefully hidden scent I'd been burying for a decade. His pupils dilated until those silver eyes were nearly black. Mate, the word tore from his throat, raw and reverent and absolutely certain. It echoed through the ceremonial hall like a declaration of war. Chaos erupted. Cade moved first, stepping away from Celeste with a snarl building in his chest. His beta guards closed ranks around him, a wall of muscle and menace. The visiting alphas who'd come to witness the engagement began backing toward exits, their survival instincts screaming at them to flee before they got caught in whatever cataclysm was about to unfold. And me, I just stood there, frozen, as the rival Alpha King began walking toward me with the inevitability of a falling star. "Don't!" Cade's voice cracked like a whip. "Theron, I'm warning you. She's nothing. A servant. You're mistaken." Theron. Even his name sounded like thunder. He didn't slow, didn't acknowledge Cade's words, didn't seem to register anything except my presence. He moved through the crowd like water finding a path downhill. Natural, unstoppable, right. Pack members scrambled out of his way, some of the Omegas actually dropping to their knees in automatic submission to the sheer dominance radiating off him in waves. I should have run. Every logical cell in my brain screamed at me to drop the tray, bolt for the servant's entrance, lose myself in the warren of corridors I'd spent 10 years learning to navigate invisibly. But my wolf, my poor, battered, half-broken wolf, surged forward with a desperate hunger that terrified me. She wanted this. She wanted him. After a decade of being denied, of being hidden and ashamed, she was reaching for this stranger with everything she had left. Isla. Cade said my name like a curse, and I finally looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time in years. I saw the panic there, swimming beneath the Alpha's command. Not jealousy, not possessiveness, panic. Because if this stranger claimed me, if he exposed what Cade had done 10 years ago, marking an Omega and then hiding it like a dirty secret, the political ramifications would be catastrophic. His engagement would shatter. His reputation would crumble. Everything he'd built on the foundation of my silence would come crashing down. Good. The thought surprised me with its viciousness. But before I could examine it, Theron was there, standing close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his body, could smell cedar and winter air and something wild and clean that made my wolf keen with longing. "Hello, little one." His voice was rough velvet, intimate despite the audience of hundreds watching with bated breath. "I've been looking for you for a very long time." "You don't know me," I managed, the words coming out, barely above a whisper. My hands were shaking so badly the wine glasses on my tray began to chime against each other in crystalline warning. "I know your scent." He reached out slowly, giving me time to flinch away, and took the tray from my trembling hands. He set it aside without looking, never breaking eye contact. "I know the song your wolf sings. I know you've been hurt, hidden, made to feel less than what you are." His hand rose to cup my face with shocking gentleness, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone. "And I know that whoever is responsible is about to learn what it means to steal from me." "She's marked." Cade's snarl came from directly behind me now. I could feel him there, a wall of familiar danger, 10 years of complicated history pressing against my back. "She bears my claim. You have no right—" "Marked?" Theron's eyes never left mine, but something in his expression went lethal. "Show me." It wasn't a request. The Alpha command rolled through the hall like physical force, pressing down on every wolf present until even Cade's strongest betas were fighting the urge to bow. My body moved before my mind could catch up, my fingers finding the collar of my servant's dress and pulling it aside to expose my shoulder blade. The mark was there, faded but visible, Cade's wolf imprinted on my skin in the silvery scar tissue that came from a mating bite. 10 years old and still tender, still aching, still binding me to an alpha who'd spent a decade pretending I didn't exist. The sound Theron made should not have been possible from a human throat. It was pure wolf, pure fury, a growl that started somewhere in his chest and built until the windows rattled in their frames. Several of the weaker wolves in the hall actually collapsed, their legs giving out under the weight of his rage. Who? The question was directed at me, but his eyes had finally left my face to fix on Cade with lethal intent. Who did this to you and then left you to rot? I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. 10 years of silence, of swallowing my truth, of protecting the man who'd marked me and abandoned me. It had carved grooves too deep to climb out of in a single moment. Cade stepped forward, drawing himself up to his full height. He was impressive in his own right, an alpha born and bred, trained from birth to lead. But next to Theron, he looked diminished somehow, younger, less certain. "I did," he said, his voice steady, despite the tremor I could see running through his frame. "And it was a mistake, a moment of weakness during a heat. But she's mine, Theron. Whatever you think you smell, whatever instinct is screaming at you right now, she's mine, has been for 10 years. Yours?" Theron's laugh was devoid of humor. "You marked an omega and then dressed her as a servant? You bound her to you and then let her serve drinks to your guests?" He turned back to me, his expression softening in a way that made my chest ache. "How long since he's touched you, spoken to you, acknowledged you as anything more than furniture?" The questions hit like physical blows. I wanted to lie, to protect Cade out of habit, if nothing else. But the truth came spilling out instead, raw and bitter. "He hasn't. Not since the night he marked me. I'm his secret, his shame." My voice cracked. "His mistake." Something fundamental shifted in Theron's expression. The rage was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was joined by something else, something that looked almost like grief. "No," he said softly, his hand still cradling my face. "You're not a mistake. You're a gift, and he's a fool who doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as you." He moved then, faster than should have been possible, spinning to face Cade with one hand wrapped gently but immovably around my wrist. "I challenge you for her." The hall went silent. Even the torches seemed to stop flickering. An alpha challenge was ancient law, superseding politics and alliances and every social contract that held pack society together. It was primal, unbreakable, absolute. Winner took all. Loser got nothing but a grave. Cade's face went white. "You can't be serious. She's not worth—" "Finish that sentence." Theron's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the hall. "I dare you. Tell me she's not worth dying for. Tell me she's not worth fighting for. Tell me, so I know exactly how much you're going to scream when I rip your throat out." I should have been horrified, should have been pleading for peace, for reason, for anything but violence. But my wolf was singing. For the first time in 10 years, she wasn't whimpering or hiding or trying to make herself small. She was howling with savage joy, with the fierce satisfaction of finally being claimed by someone who didn't see her as a liability. Celeste stepped forward, her face a careful mask of concern, though I caught the calculation in her eyes. "Alpha Cade, perhaps it would be wise to—" "Shut up, Celeste." Cade's response was vicious enough to make her flinch. He was staring at Theron with an expression I'd never seen before. Not quite fear, but something close to it. You understand what you're asking? This goes beyond a simple challenge. This is political. My father, the council, the alliances we've built. If you do this, you declare war on half the packs in the Northern Territories. Good. Theron's smile was all teeth. I've been bored lately anyway. Stop. The word burst from my lips before I could contain it. Both alphas turned to look at me, and I forced myself to straighten my spine, to meet their gazes, even though every omega instinct I had was screaming at me to submit. This is insane. You don't even know me. You can't. I know enough. Theron's grip on my wrist loosened, becoming a caress. I know you've been suffering for 10 years while this coward played politics with your life. I know you were planning to run tonight. I can smell the goodbye you wrote, the determination, the resignation. I know you've given up hope of ever being more than a secret. His silver eyes blazed. And I know that if I let you walk out of this hall without fighting for you, I'll regret it for the rest of my considerably long life. Cade made a frustrated sound. Isla, tell him. Tell him you don't want this. And there it was, the question I'd been avoiding, the choice I'd never thought I'd get to make. Did I want this? Did I want a stranger, no matter how powerful, no matter how right his scent felt against mine, to kill for me, to claim me, to drag me into a life that would make my current existence look peaceful by comparison? I looked at Cade, really looked at him, at the man who'd touched me once with reverence and then spent a decade treating me like a stain he couldn't quite scrub away, at the alpha who'd chosen pride and politics over the mate bond, who'd let me serve him wine while his betrothed hung on his arm, at 10 years of silence and shame and slow suffocation. Then I looked at Theron, at this stranger who'd walked into a room full of his enemies and seen only me, who'd called me mate with a certainty that shook the foundations of the world, who was offering me something I'd stopped believing in, the chance to be chosen, claimed, cherished without apology. The words stuck in my throat. 10 years of conditioning, of making myself small, of believing I wasn't worth the trouble. I don't know what I want. That's all right, Theron's voice gentled. You don't have to decide right now, but I do. He released my wrist and stepped forward, positioning himself between Cade and me with deliberate intent. The challenge stands. Tomorrow night, the sacred clearing, witnessed by whichever alphas are brave enough to watch. If I win, his voice dropped to something dark and promising. She comes with me. No arguments, no negotiations. She becomes mine in every way that matters. And if you lose? Cade's question carried a hint of desperate hope. Theron's laugh was soft, almost pitying. I won't. The night air bit at my skin as I fled the ceremonial hall, my lungs burning with the effort of holding back sobs that threatened to tear me apart from the inside out. Behind me, I could hear the chaos, raised voices, accusations flying, the sound of furniture being overturned as tensions finally snapped. But I didn't look back, couldn't look back. If I did, I might see Theron's silver eyes tracking my retreat, might feel the pull of something I'd stopped letting myself want. The servants' quarters were blessedly empty when I reached them, everyone still at the engagement party, turned catastrophe. I slammed the door to my tiny room and pressed my back against it, sliding down until I sat in a heap on the cold floor. The mark on my shoulder blade throbbed in time with my racing heart, a phantom pain that had become as constant as breathing. 10 years of this, 10 years of feeling Cade on the other side of an invisible tether, always too far away, always just out of reach. And now, Theron. His scent still clung to me, cedar and winter storms, and something indefinably male that made my wolf pace restlessly beneath my skin. She was furious with me for running. I could feel her clawing at my consciousness, demanding I go back, demanding I claim what was being offered. But she didn't understand. She couldn't understand the cost of hope. Isla. The voice came from my window, soft but commanding, and I nearly screamed. Theron sat perched on the narrow ledge, 3 stories up, as comfortable as if he were lounging in a throne room instead of courting death on crumbling stone. The moonlight caught in his dark hair, turned his silver eyes luminous. He looked otherworldly, dangerous, beautiful in the way a storm was beautiful, devastating and impossible to look away from. "How did you—" I started, but he was already climbing through the window with fluid grace, landing soundlessly on my floor. "I followed your scent." He straightened, taking in my sparse quarters with a single sweeping glance. The narrow bed with its threadbare blanket, the single chest that held everything I owned, the window that looked out onto nothing but the servants' courtyard. His jaw tightened. "This is where he's kept you? For 10 years? "He didn't keep me anywhere." The defensiveness in my tone surprised me. "I chose to stay." "Did you?" Theron moved closer, his presence filling my small room until there was no air left that didn't taste like him. "Or did he make you believe you had no other choice?" The question struck too close to truths I'd been avoiding. I pushed myself up from the floor, putting the bed between us. Not that it would stop him if he decided to close the distance. "You need to leave. If someone sees you here, let them see." He braced his hands on the footboard of my bed, leaning forward with predatory focus. "Let the whole goddamn pack see that you're not his dirty secret anymore, that you're mine." "I'm not yours." But the words came out weak, unconvincing. My wolf was howling now, throwing herself against the cage of my ribs with desperate force. "Aren't you?" His voice dropped to a rumble that I felt in my bones. "Look at me and tell me you don't feel it. The pull, the recognition, the absolute certainty that we were meant to find each other." I wanted to lie, wanted to protect myself the way I'd learned to over 10 years of disappointment and heartbreak. But when I met his eyes, I saw something that made my carefully constructed walls start to crumble. Not lust, though that was there too, simmering beneath the surface, but something deeper, older, like he'd been searching for me long before he walked into that hall. "Who are you?" I whispered. "Really?" Theron straightened, and for a moment his expression went distant, haunted. "I'm the Alpha King of the Shadow Peak territories. I rule 7 packs across the western mountains and twice that many minor houses. I've led my people for 15 years, since I took the throne at 18 after my father died in the border wars." He paused, something raw flickering across his face. "And I'm a widower." The confession landed like a physical blow. "You were mated before." Her name was Lyra. His voice roughened around the edges. "We were betrothed from childhood, married on my 21st birthday, and she was dead before our first anniversary. Rogue attack. She was pregnant with our first child when they found her." My hand went to my mouth, horror washing through me. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be." He shook his head sharply. "I grieved. God knows I grieved. For 5 years I was drowning in it, barely functional, holding my throne through sheer stubbornness and the loyalty of my betas. But here's the thing about arranged matings. about political marriages. They're not mate bonds. Lyra was kind and brave, and she didn't deserve what happened to her. But we weren't fated. We didn't have what you and I have. We don't have anything, but my voice cracked on the words. We met 3 hours ago. Did we? Theron moved around the bed with liquid grace, and this time I didn't retreat. Or have our wolves been searching for each other across mountains and years, calling out in the dark, desperate for an answer? He stopped, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, could count the flecks of darker silver in his eyes. I've been to 30 packs in the last 6 months, Isla. Attended every gathering, every ceremony, every tedious political function. My betas thought I was building alliances, securing borders. But I was looking for something I couldn't name. A scent on the wind. A feeling that somewhere someone was waiting. His hand rose to hover near my face, not quite touching, giving me the choice. And then I walked into that hall and I knew you'd been hurt, knew you'd been hidden away like something shameful, knew that if I didn't act immediately, I'd lose you before I ever really found you. I leaned into his touch before I could stop myself, and the contact sent electricity racing through every nerve. His palm was warm against my cheek, calloused from weapons and work, impossibly gentle. My wolf surged forward with a keening cry, recognizing something my human mind was still struggling to accept. He'll kill you. The words tumbled out, desperate and terrified. Cade, he's been training his whole life. He's never lost a challenge, never even come close. Good. Theron's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. I'd hate for this to be boring. This isn't a joke. I pulled away from his touch, my fear transmuting into anger. You're talking about dying for someone you don't even know. For what? Pride? Some misguided sense of love? The words stopped me mid-sentence. Theron took advantage of my shock to close the distance again, his hands framing my face with devastating tenderness. Not the love that comes from years of companionship, he continued, his voice low and sure. Not the comfortable affection of shared history, but the love that exists before you ever meet someone. The knowledge that they're out there, waiting. The certainty that finding them will change everything. I've loved you since before I knew your name, Isla. And I'll be damned if I let some coward who was too weak to claim you properly keep you locked in this prison. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and unchecked. You don't understand. The mark, Cade's mark, it means I'm bound to him. Even if you win tomorrow, even if you take me away from here, I'll always be tied to him. Always feel him at the edges of my consciousness. The mate bond doesn't just break because we want it to. Then we'll break it anyway. Theron's thumbs brushed away my tears with infinite care. There are rituals, old magic from before the packs split into territories. It'll be painful and dangerous and might not work, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying if that's what it takes to free you from him. Why? The question came out broken. Why would you do this for me? He leaned forward until our foreheads touched, until I could feel his breath against my lips. Because you're mine. Because the universe doesn't make mistakes when it comes to true mates. Because I've been half alive for 5 years, and the moment I saw you, I remembered what it felt like to be whole. His voice dropped to a whisper. And because you deserve to be chosen, Isla. Not hidden, not tolerated, chosen, every single day. The kiss happened before either of us consciously decided on it. One moment we were staring at each other, breathing the same air, trembling on the edge of something irreversible. The next, his mouth was on mine, and the world was ending and beginning all at once. Nothing about it was gentle. Theron kissed like he fought, with total commitment, fierce intensity, as if losing wasn't even a concept he understood. His hands tangled in my hair, tilting my head back to deepen the angle, and I heard myself make a sound that was part moan, part sob, part prayer. My wolf was howling victory, throwing herself into the bond forming between us with reckless abandon, and the mark on my shoulder blade caught fire. I gasped against Theron's mouth, pain and pleasure warring as Cade's old claim reacted to the new connection trying to form. It felt like my skin was tearing, like something inside me was being ripped in two. Theron pulled back immediately, his eyes wide with concern. "What's wrong? What did I—" "The mark." I clutched at my shoulder, feeling blood well beneath my fingers where Cade's bite had split open. "It's fighting back." Theron's expression went lethal. Without asking permission, he gently turned me and pulled aside my collar to examine the damage. I felt him go absolutely still behind me, felt his breath stop in his lungs. When he spoke again, his voice was barely recognizable. "This isn't just a mating mark. This is a possession claim." "What's the difference?" I tried to look over my shoulder at him, but his hand on my neck kept me still. A mating mark is consent, two wolves choosing each other, binding themselves together with mutual desire. His fingers traced the edges of the scar with feather-light touches. A possession claim is forced. It's an alpha using their dominance to own an omega against their will. It's illegal in every territory, punishable by death. The room tilted. "No, Cade wouldn't. He was in heat, and I was there. And it just happened. Did you want it?" Theron's question was quiet, terribly gentle. "When he marked you, did you want him to?" The memory rose, unbidden. 10 years old, but fresh as yesterday. Cade's eyes wild with heat, his scent overwhelming, intoxicating. My omega nature responding to his need, my body preparing itself to receive him. And then his teeth in my shoulder, sinking deep, claiming me in the oldest way possible, while I was still trying to understand what was happening. The pain had been excruciating. The pleasure had been worse. And afterward, when the heat haze cleared and I'd seen the horror in his eyes, I'd understood that whatever I'd thought was happening between us had been a lie. "I don't know," I whispered finally. I was young, overwhelmed. He was the Alpha's son, and I was an omega he could dominate. Theron turned me to face him, his silver eyes blazing. An easy target during a vulnerable moment, and then he spent 10 years making you believe it was your fault, that you were the mistake. Stop. I pressed my hands against his chest, needing space to think, to breathe, to process what he was saying. Even if you're right, even if he did force the claim, it doesn't change anything. The bond is still there. I still feel him every second of every day. And tomorrow night, you're going to fight him, and one of you is going to die, and My voice broke. I can't be responsible for that. I can't. You're not responsible for any of this. Theron caught my hands, pressed them flat against his heart. I could feel it beating, strong and steady, impossibly alive. Cade is responsible for forcing a claim, for hiding you, for letting you believe you were less than worthy of being loved openly. And tomorrow night, I'm going to make him answer for all of it. And if you lose? His smile was absolutely confident, borderline arrogant. I won't. Everyone loses eventually. Not to him. Theron's expression went serious. I've led armies, Isla. I've defended my borders against packs that outnumbered us 3-1. I've killed rogues and traitors and challengers who thought they could take what was mine. Cade is soft, spoiled. He's been protected his whole life by his father's reputation and the pack's resources. He's never had to truly fight for anything. His eyes glinted dangerously. I have. And I'm going to show him exactly what happens when you try to cage something that was meant to fly. A knock at the door made us both freeze. Isla? The voice was female, familiar, one of the other Omega servants. The Alpha wants to see you, now. Drop a like if you're as invested in this as I am. This story is about to get wild. Theron's hands tightened on mine. You don't have to go. Yes, I do. I pulled away reluctantly, my body already missing his warmth. If I don't, he'll just send guards, and then questions will be asked about why the rival Alpha King is in my room at midnight. Let them ask, but he stepped back, giving me space to move toward the door. I'll be close. If he hurts you, he won't. I wasn't sure if I believed it, but I needed Theron to stay here, to not do something rash that would get him killed before the challenge even began. He needs me compliant for tomorrow, needs me to stand there and watch while he kills you to maintain his claim. The words tasted like poison. Theron's expression softened, and he crossed the room in 2 strides to press a kiss to my forehead. Chaste, reverent, full of promises I was terrified to believe in. I'll see you tomorrow night, he murmured against my skin. And when this is over, you're never going to doubt again that you were worth fighting for. Then he was gone, slipping through the window with the same impossible grace he'd used to arrive, disappearing into the night like something out of a dream. I touched my forehead where his lips had been, feeling the warmth lingering there before forcing myself to open the door. The Omega servant, Maya, her name was Maya, looked at me with worried eyes. He's in his private study. He seemed upset. That was an understatement, I was certain. I followed her through the silent corridors of the pack house, my heart hammering against my ribs. The mark on my shoulder had stopped bleeding, but still throbbed in time with my pulse. Every step felt like walking toward an execution, mine or Cade's. I wasn't sure anymore. The Alpha's private study was exactly what you'd expect. Dark wood, heavy furniture, the mounted heads of impressive kills decorating the walls. Cade stood at the window, his back to me, shoulders rigid with tension. He didn't turn when I entered. Close the door. I did, my hands shaking. The room suddenly felt too small, too airless, like a trap closing around me. 10 years, Cade said finally, his voice hollow. 10 years I've protected you, kept you safe, made sure you had a place in this pack despite what you are. He turned then, and I was shocked by what I saw in his face. Not anger, not even fear, desperation. And you're going to throw it all away for some stranger who smelled you across a crowded room? Protected me. The words burst out before I could stop them. You've been ashamed of me. You marked me and then pretended I didn't exist. I kept you alive, his shout echoed off the walls. Do you have any idea what my father would have done if he'd found out? What the pack elders would have demanded? You'd have been exiled, banned, left to die as a rogue because I couldn't control myself during a heat. He ran his hands through his hair, the perfect Alpha composure cracking. Everything I did was to keep you safe. Or to keep yourself safe, I countered quietly. From scandal, from judgment, from having to choose between me and your precious legacy. Cade flinched like I'd struck him. That's not fair. None of this is fair. I pressed my hand against the mark on my shoulder, feeling it pulse beneath my palm. You forced this claim, Cade. I was 18 and terrified and completely overwhelmed, and you used your alpha dominance to make me submit. I didn't. But he couldn't finish the denial. We both knew the truth. The silence stretched between us, heavy with 10 years of unspoken resentment and buried grief. Finally, Cade spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. What if I chose you, tomorrow before the challenge? What if I stood in front of the entire pack and acknowledged you as my mate, broke off the engagement with Celeste, made you Luna? His eyes met mine, pleading. Would that be enough? Would you stay? The offer should have meant everything. It was what I'd dreamed about for years, being claimed openly, proudly, without shame. But as I looked at Cade, at this alpha who'd kept me in the shadows for a decade, all I felt was tired, so incredibly tired. No, I said simply, it wouldn't. His face crumpled. Why? Because of him? Because some rival king showed up and played the hero? Because you had 10 years to choose me, and you didn't. I moved toward the door, suddenly desperate to be anywhere but here. Because Theron looked at me once and saw everything you've spent a decade trying to hide. Because I deserve more than being someone's guilty secret or political sacrifice. He'll destroy you. Cade's words were sharp with panic. Everything he touches burns. His first mate, his father's alliances, the packs that opposed him, they all burned. And when he gets bored or distracted or finds some new cause to fight for, he'll burn you too. I paused with my hand on the doorknob, looking back at this alpha who'd shaped so much of my pain. Maybe. But at least I'll have burned bright instead of slowly suffocating in the dark. Then I left, closing the door on 10 years of broken promises and carefully maintained lies. The corridors stretched before me, familiar and suffocating. Tomorrow night, in the sacred clearing, everything would change. Either Theron would win, and I'd be free to discover what it meant to be chosen without shame. Or Cade would win, and I'd spend the rest of my life knowing exactly what I'd lost. My wolf paced restlessly, her certainty unshaken. She knew who our mate was, knew that somewhere out in the darkness, a silver-eyed alpha was preparing for battle, knew that tomorrow night, one way or another, our lives would never be the same. I just hoped we'd survive long enough to see what came after. The sacred clearing looked different in daylight. I'd been here before, years ago, for pack ceremonies and full moon gatherings. But now, with torches being set into the frozen ground and spectators arriving from neighboring territories, it felt less like holy ground and more like an execution site. The ancient stones that marked the circle's boundary were older than memory, covered in runes that pulsed with faint luminescence as dusk approached. This was neutral ground, blessed by the moon goddess herself. Blood spilled, here was binding. Challenges fought here were absolute. I stood at the edge of the clearing, wrapped in a cloak that did nothing to stop the cold seeping into my bones. Or maybe it wasn't the temperature at all. Maybe it was fear, crystallizing in my veins, making me feel brittle enough to shatter. Around me, alphas from a dozen different packs gathered in small clusters, their conversations low and charged. Some were placing bets. Others were forming political allegiances based on who they thought would win. None of them looked at me directly. The Omega at the center of this catastrophe, the prize being fought over like a piece of territory. You shouldn't be here. The voice came from my left, and I turned to find Celeste standing there, wrapped in furs that probably cost more than everything I'd ever owned combined. Her face was perfectly composed, but I caught the edge of fury in her eyes. This is Alpha business. It's my business, I replied, keeping my voice level. They're fighting over me. The least I can do is witness it. Celeste's laugh was cold. Is that what you think this is about? You? She stepped closer, her beta scent sharp with aggression. This is about pride, power, territory. You're just the excuse they're using to tear each other apart. When it's over, regardless of who wins, you'll still be nothing but an Omega who got above her station. The words should have hurt. A day ago, they would have. But something had shifted in me since Theron climbed through my window. Since he'd called me his mate with a certainty that shook worlds. Maybe, I said quietly, or maybe I'll finally be someone who was worth fighting for. Before Celeste could respond, a ripple of tension moved through the crowd. I turned to see Cade entering the clearing from the north, flanked by his father, the former Alpha, gray-muzzled but still powerful, and a contingent of the pack's strongest warriors. Cade had already stripped to the waist despite the freezing temperature, his muscled torso marked with ceremonial paint that emphasized his strength. He moved with the fluid confidence of someone who'd never truly doubted his own superiority. His eyes found mine across the clearing, and something complicated flickered in their amber depths. Regret, maybe, or determination. He'd tried 3 more times last night to convince me to call this off, each attempt more desperate than the last. I'd refused, not because I wanted him. Dead, despite everything, some small part of me still remembered what it felt like to be 18 and foolish enough to believe an Alpha's heat-glazed promises. But because I needed to know what it felt like to be chosen without apology. The crowd shifted again, and then Theron was there, entering from the south like a storm given form. He wore nothing but loose pants that sat low on his hips, his torso bare and marked with scars that told stories of battles survived. Unlike Cade's ceremonial paint, these were real, proof of a life spent fighting rather than being protected. His silver eyes swept the clearing with predatory assessment before finding me, and the intensity of his gaze made my breath catch. He smiled, and it was all confidence and dark promise. "I'm going to win," that smile said. "And then you're mine." My wolf surged forward with a howl of agreement that I barely managed to keep internal. The mark on my shoulder, Cade's forced claim, burned in response, as if it could sense its own approaching obsolescence. An elder stepped into the center of the clearing, her ancient face weathered by centuries of witnessing pack law enacted. She carried a staff topped with silver that caught the dying light, and when she struck it against the ground 3 times, the gathered wolves fell silent. "We are here," she intoned, her voice carrying with supernatural clarity, "to witness a challenge as old as our kind. 2 alphas, 1 claim, trial by combat under the eyes of the moon goddess herself." She turned to face Cade. "Alpha Cade Thornridge, you stand as the claimant. State your case." Cade stepped forward, his shoulders squared. 10 years ago, I marked Isla Crane as my mate. The bond was sealed in heat and instinct, blessed by the ancient ways. She bears my claim on her skin and in her soul. This challenge is an insult to pack law and tradition. I will defend what is mine. The elder's expression remained neutral as she turned to Theron. "Alpha King Theron Blackwood, you stand as the challenger. State your case." Theron moved with liquid grace to stand opposite Cade, separated by 20 feet of sacred ground. 10 years ago, Cade Thornridge forced a possession claim on an Omega too young and overwhelmed to consent. He marked her in dominance, not love. He bound her in shame, not honor. And then he spent a decade treating her like a secret to be hidden rather than a mate to be cherished. His voice dropped, going rough with barely leashed fury. "I challenge not just for her freedom, but for justice. He doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as her, let alone claim her as his own. A murmur ran through the crowd. Accusations of forced claiming were serious, potentially invalidating the entire bond if proven. Cade's father took a threatening step forward, but the elder raised her staff, stopping him cold. The challenge is acknowledged. The combat will proceed until one Alpha submits or dies. She struck her staff against the ground again, and this time the runes on the boundary stones flared bright enough to hurt. Let the moon goddess judge the truth. Begin. For a heartbeat, neither Alpha moved. They stood locked in a staring contest, dominant wills crashing against each other like waves against cliffs. The air itself seemed to thicken with their power, pressing down on every wolf present until even the strongest betas were struggling not to drop to their knees. Then Cade shifted. The transformation was fluid, practiced, his human form dissolving into that of a massive amber wolf with eyes that burned gold. He was beautiful in the way all apex predators were beautiful, perfectly designed for violence, every muscle optimized for the kill. His growl rolled across the clearing like thunder, a warning and a promise. Theron shifted in response, and the difference was staggering. Where Cade was large, Theron was enormous. His wolf form was midnight black, with those same eerie silver eyes, easily 50 pounds heavier, and radiating a dominance that made Cade's display look like a pup's posturing. When he threw back his head and howled, the sound resonated in my chest, in my bones, in the very marrow of me. My wolf responded with a cry I couldn't contain, my body going rigid as something fundamental recognized him as ours. The mark on my shoulder split open again, blood soaking through my shirt. I pressed my hand against it, feeling something tear inside me as my wolf tried to sever the connection to Cade and forge a new one with Theron. Around me, people were staring, whispering, pointing at the blood. But I couldn't look away from the clearing, from the two wolves now circling each other with deadly intent. Cade struck first, his youth and speed giving him advantage in the initial exchange. He went low, teeth snapping for Theron's foreleg, trying to hamstring him and eliminate his mobility. But Theron twisted aside with impossible grace for something so large, his counterstrike catching Cade across the shoulder hard enough to send him stumbling. First, blood. The scent of it hit the air, rich and copper, and the crowd leaned forward collectively. They came together again in a clash of fur and fangs, rolling across the frozen ground in a tangle of violence. I could hear the impact of their bodies, the tearing of flesh, the bone-deep growls of alphas fighting for dominance. Cade managed to get his jaws around Theron's neck, and my heart stopped. But Theron used the leverage to flip them, slamming Cade into the ground hard enough that I heard ribs crack. Blood was flowing freely now from wounds on both wolves. Cade's right ear was torn, hanging by threads of tissue. Theron had deep gouges across his flank where Cade's claws had found purchase. But neither was slowing. If anything, they were accelerating, the fight taking on a frenetic quality as instinct overrode strategy. "He's going to lose." Celeste's voice came from beside me again, edged with vindictive satisfaction. "Look at them. Cade's faster, younger. Theron's already tiring." But she was wrong. I could see it, even if she couldn't. Theron wasn't tiring. He was calculating. Every exchange, every bite and claw strike, he was learning Cade's patterns, adapting. My mate, and God, when had I started thinking of him that way, had fought battles that made this challenge look like a sparring match. He was a king who'd held his throne through blood and iron, and Cade was just a prince who'd never had to truly fight for anything. The realization must have hit Cade at the same moment. His attacks became more desperate, less controlled. He lunged for Theron's throat with everything he had, abandoning defense for one killing strike. And Theron was ready. He sidestepped with minimal movement, his jaws closing around the back of Cade's neck in the position of ultimate dominance. The killing bite. One squeeze, and Cade's spine would snap. The clearing went absolutely silent. Theron held him there, fangs dimpling skin but not quite breaking it. The message was clear. Submit or die. Seconds ticked past, each one an eternity. Cade struggled, his wolf fighting the instinctive urge to bare his throat, to acknowledge the superior alpha. His pride warred with his survival instinct in a battle I could practically see playing out. Finally, with a whimper that carried across the deadly quiet clearing, Cade went limp. Submission. Theron held the position a moment longer, making sure everyone witnessed the surrender, before releasing him. Cade shifted back to human form immediately, his body a mass of injuries, blood streaming from dozens of wounds. He stayed on his knees in the frozen dirt, head bowed, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The humiliation of losing was almost worse than death would have been for an alpha like him. Theron shifted back as well, magnificent and terrible in his victory. Blood matted his dark hair and ran in rivulets down his chest, but he stood tall, unbroken. His silver eyes found me across the clearing, and the possessive heat in them made something low in my belly clench with need. The challenge is complete. The elder's voice rang out. Alpha King Theron Blackwood is victorious. The claim passes to him. But Theron wasn't done. He crossed the clearing to where Cade still knelt, moving with the lethal grace of a predator approaching wounded prey. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the sacred ground. You forced a claim on an innocent Omega. You bound her with dominance instead of consent. You spent 10 years making her believe she was a mistake when she was the most precious thing you'd ever touch. He crouched, getting face level with the defeated Alpha. I should kill you for that. The old laws would allow it. Demand it, even. Cade's father started forward again, but other Alphas held him back. This was Theron's right as victor. Judgment and mercy were his to dispense. But she wouldn't want me to, Theron continued, glancing back at me. She's kinder than either of us deserve. So instead, I'm going to let you live with what you've lost. Every day for the rest of your life, you're going to remember that you had something irreplaceable and you were too much of a coward to claim it properly. You're going to watch her from a distance and know that she's mine now. Happy, cherished, loved the way she always should have been. He stood, dismissing Cade, as if he were already forgotten. Then he was striding toward me, cutting through the crowd like they didn't exist. My heart hammered against my ribs, my wolf throwing herself against my consciousness with frantic joy. People moved aside hastily, clearing a path, until nothing stood between us but air and anticipation. Hello again, little one, Theron said when he reached me, his voice gone soft despite the blood and violence still clinging to his skin. I told you I wouldn't lose. You're hurt. My hands rose automatically to touch the worst of the wounds, deep claw marks across his ribs, a nasty bite on his shoulder. You need a healer. I need you. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing across my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. The wounds will heal. They always do. But I've been incomplete for 5 years, and I'm not waiting another second to fix that. The mark, I whispered, pressing my hand against my bloody shoulder. Cade's claim. It's still there. I can still feel him. Not for long. Theron's expression went determined. There's someone I need you to meet. She's waiting at my territory, a hedge witch who specializes in bond magic. It won't be easy or painless, but she can sever forced claims, free you completely. Hope, that dangerous thing I'd been trying to suppress, flared bright in my chest. Are you sure? I'm sure that I want you to choose me freely, not because you're bound by some challenge victory or because Cade's claim was broken through violence. His other hand came up, so he was cradling my face between his palms. I want you to look at me one day, a week from now, a month, a year, and decide that I'm who you want, that we're what you want. No bonds forcing it, no marks compelling it, just choice. Tears were streaming down my face, but for the first time in 10 years, they weren't born from pain or shame or resignation. And if I choose wrong? If I choose you and regret it? Theron's smile was crooked, almost boyish despite the blood and battle hardness. Then I'll spend every day of the rest of our lives making sure you don't. I'll wake you with kisses. I'll defend your honor to anyone who questions it. I'll build you a garden full of healing herbs and make sure you never doubt for a second that you are precious and wanted and absolutely irreplaceable. He leaned closer until our foreheads touched. I'll love you so thoroughly that the very idea of regret becomes impossible. Around us, the clearing had erupted into chaos. Alphas arguing about political implications, betas trying to tend to Cade, pack members choosing sides. But in this bubble of space, with Theron's warmth surrounding me and his scent filling my lungs, none of it mattered. Take me home, I whispered. Not to my cabin in Cade's territory, not to the servants' quarters I'd occupied for 10 years, but to wherever this silver-eyed Alpha King would lead me, to whatever future we could build together. Please, just take me home. Theron's answering smile was radiant, despite the gore coating him. With pleasure, my mate, with absolute pleasure. He swept me into his arms as if I weighed nothing, cradling me against his chest despite his injuries. My arms wrapped around his neck automatically, and I buried my face against his shoulder, breathing in cedar and winter storms, and underneath it all, the scent of us, of possibility, of choice freely made instead of forced through dominance. As he carried me from the sacred clearing, past the shocked faces and whispered speculation, I let myself believe for the first time in a decade that maybe, just maybe, I was worth fighting for after all. And tomorrow, when we reached the hedge witch and began the painful process of severing Cade's forced claim, I would start learning what it meant to be free. The journey to Theron's territory took 3 days through mountain passes that grew progressively wilder and more beautiful. We traveled with his inner circle, 5 betas who moved with military precision and treated me with a deference that made me deeply uncomfortable. They called me my lady and Luna, despite the fact that I wore servant's clothes and still bore another alpha's mark on my skin. When I protested, Theron had simply smiled and said, "They see what I see, what you'll see eventually, once Cade's poison is purged from your system." The poison he spoke of wasn't just the forced claim. It was 10 years of conditioning, of believing I was something shameful, something to be hidden. I caught myself apologizing for taking up space, for eating my share of rations, for existing too loudly. Each time Theron would stop whatever he was doing and gently but firmly remind me that I had nothing to apologize for, that I was allowed to take up space, that my existence was not an inconvenience but a gift. It was exhausting, learning to unlearn a decade of survival mechanisms. On the second night, huddled around a fire while his betas took watch, Theron had pulled me against his side and asked, "Tell me something about yourself that has nothing to do with being an Omega. Something you loved before Cade taught you to make yourself small." The question had caught me off guard. No one had asked me about myself in years. Not my preferences or dreams or the person I might have been if circumstances had been different. I'd opened my mouth to say I didn't know, that I couldn't remember who I'd been before, but then a memory surfaced, fragile and precious. "I like to draw," I'd whispered. "Before. My grandmother taught me. She said I had a gift for capturing the essence of things, not just what they looked like, but what they felt like. I used to fill sketchbooks with wolves mid-hunt, with the way moonlight looked through winter branches, with the expressions people made when they thought no one was watching." Theron had gone very still against me. "What happened to the sketchbooks?" "I burned them. After Cade marked me, and then after he made it clear what we were, what we weren't." The memory ached like an old wound. I didn't want reminders of who I'd been before I learned to disappear. His arm had tightened around me, and when he'd pressed a kiss to the top of my head, I'd felt wetness that might have been tears. "When we get home," he'd said roughly, "I'm buying you every art supply in the Western Territories, and you're going to fill 1,000 sketchbooks with whatever you want. You're going to remember who you were and become who you're meant to be and never disappear again." Now, as we crested the final ridge and Shadow Peak territory spread below us, I understood why they called it that. The mountains cast perpetual shadows across the valley, creating a landscape of dramatic contrasts. Brilliant light and deep darkness, stark beauty and harsh reality. The Pack compound wasn't a single sprawling mansion like Cade's family maintained, but rather a collection of buildings arranged in concentric circles, with the largest structure at the center like a heart. "It's a defensible position," Theron explained, following my gaze. "We've held this territory for 8 generations against every challenge. The shadows make it look forbidding, but once you're inside—" He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "I hope you'll find it welcoming." The Pack members who came out to greet us were nothing like what I'd expected. No one bowed or scraped or treated Theron like an untouchable sovereign. They clasped his forearms in warrior's greetings, asked about his wounds with genuine concern, and regarded me with open curiosity rather than disdain. An older woman with gray-shot hair and kind eyes took one look at the blood on my shoulder and immediately began fussing. "The hedge witch is waiting," she informed Theron with the kind of familiarity that suggested she'd known him since childhood. "But this girl needs food and rest before any ritual work. She's half-starved and running on fumes." "Mara," Theron began, but the woman cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Don't Mara me, pup. I changed your diapers and I'll box your ears regardless of how many alphas you've killed. She eats first. The mark has waited 10 years. It can wait another few hours." To my shock, Theron actually looked chastened. "Yes, Mara." The woman, Mara apparently, turned to me with a warm smile. "Come along, child. Let's get you sorted." I glanced at Theron, uncertain. He nodded encouragingly. "Mara raised me after my mother died in childbirth. If anyone can be trusted, it's her. I'll have food sent to my chambers and check on the ritual preparations. Rest. Please." The last word was spoken softly, a request rather than a command. I found myself nodding, following Mara through the compound as she kept up a steady stream of commentary about renovations and Pack politics, and how the winter had been particularly harsh this year. It was overwhelming and comforting in equal measure. proof that life existed here beyond dominance displays and political maneuvering. Theron's chambers were nothing like I'd imagined. I'd expected opulence, ostentation, the trappings of an Alpha King's power. Instead, I found warmth. The rooms were large but not cavernous, decorated with comfortable furniture and shelves full of books that showed signs of actual reading. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, already crackling with heat. And through an archway, I glimpsed a bedroom with a bed large enough for a fully shifted wolf. He had everything cleaned and prepared as soon as he returned from your territory, Mara said, following my gaze. Couldn't stop talking about you. She'll need space for her healing herbs, he said. Make sure the lighting is good in case she likes to read. Stock the bathing room with scents that aren't too overwhelming, she smiled. In 15 years, I've never seen him fuss over anyone like this. Not even Lyra, moon goddess rest her soul. The mention of Theron's first mate made something uncomfortable twist in my chest. He told me about her, about what happened. Mara's expression softened with old grief. She was a sweet girl, too gentle for the violence that found her. But she and Theron, they cared for each other, but it wasn't fate. Not like you. How can you know that? The question came out sharper than intended. You've known me for all of 10 minutes. Because I've never seen Theron's wolf respond to anyone the way he responds to you. Mara moved to the fireplace, adjusting the logs with practiced efficiency. When he came back from your territory, when he told us he'd found his true mate, his wolf was at the surface, content, settled in a way he hasn't been since before Lyra died. That's not politics or strategy or heat-driven instinct. That's recognition. A knock at the door interrupted us. 2 younger pack members entered with trays of food, roasted meat, fresh bread, winter vegetables prepared in ways that made my mouth water. They set everything on a low table near the fire and departed with respectful nods. Eat, Mara commanded gently. I'll return in 2 hours to take you to the hedge witch. When she left, I found myself alone for the first time since the challenge. I should have been hungry. I'd barely eaten in days. But instead, I drifted to the window, looking out at the shadow-striped valley and trying to process the seismic shifts in my reality. 3 days ago, I'd been preparing to run, to disappear into the southern territories and start over as someone new, someone without history or baggage or forced marks binding them to alphas who couldn't commit. Now, I was standing in the chambers of an Alpha King who'd fought for me, who'd carried me across mountain passes while his own wounds were still healing, who'd apparently spent the journey home planning how to make me comfortable. It was too much, too fast. The cynical part of me that had learned to protect itself whispered that this was another trap, another alpha who would reveal his true colors once the novelty wore off. But my wolf, that aspect of myself I'd been suppressing for so long, was singing. She recognized Theron in a way that transcended logic or caution. She knew, with the certainty of instinct, that he was ours. I forced myself to eat, knowing I'd need strength for whatever the hedge witch's ritual entailed. The food was rich and flavorful, prepared with skill that suggested Theron's pack valued quality over mere sustenance. As I ate, I examined the bookshelves, noting titles on military strategy, pack law, and, surprisingly, poetry. Volumes of verses about love and loss and the complicated nature of existence. I pulled one down, opening to a page marked with a ribbon. We loved with a love that was more than love, the poem read. The words stark against cream-colored paper. Someone, Theron presumably, had written in the margin, "This is what I'm searching for. Not duty, Not arrangement. This. My throat tightened. How long had he been searching? How many gatherings and ceremonies had he attended, looking for something he couldn't name? And what were the odds that we'd find each other now, when I'd been on the verge of disappearing forever? The door opened without preamble, and Theron entered. He'd bathed and changed, his wounds freshly bandaged, his dark hair still damp. He stopped when he saw me holding the book, something vulnerable flickering across his face. That was Lyra's favorite, he said quietly. She used to read it to me when the nightmares got bad after my father died. Said poetry could make sense of things when logic failed. I closed the book carefully, replacing it on the shelf. Do you miss her? Every day. His honesty was jarring. Not the way a mate misses their other half, but the way you miss a friend who understood you. She deserved better than what fate gave her. Better than being murdered because rogues wanted to hurt me. He crossed the room, stopping a respectful distance away. I won't lie to you, Isla. Loving me is dangerous. Being mine means painting a target on your back. If you want to walk away after the mark is broken, I'll understand. I'll give you enough gold to start over anywhere you choose, and protection to get you there safely. The offer was genuine. I could see it in his eyes, hear it in his voice. He would let me go if I asked, would honor my choice even if it destroyed him. The knowledge settled something deep inside me, the certainty that this wasn't coercion or possession, but genuine respect for my autonomy. Ask me again after the ritual, I said softly, when I'm free to choose without Cade's claim influencing every thought and feeling. Ask me then, and I'll give you an honest answer. Relief and something darker, hope, maybe, or fear, warred in his expression. Fair enough, he gestured to the archway. The witch is ready, are you? No, I wasn't ready to have my skin flayed open, my soul laid bare, every connection to Cade severed in what promised to be excruciating magic. But I was tired of being bound to someone who'd never wanted me properly. Tired of feeling him at the edges of my consciousness, a constant reminder of rejection and shame. Yes, I lied. Then more honestly, I'm terrified. But yes. Theron's smile was sad and understanding. He held out his hand, an invitation, not a command. After a moment's hesitation, I took it, letting him lead me through corridors and down stairs that seemed to burrow into the mountain itself. The air grew colder as we descended, thick with the scent of earth and old magic. The ritual chamber was carved directly from stone, circular and ancient. Runes covered every surface, glowing with the same eerie luminescence I'd seen at the sacred clearing. In the center stood a woman, who looked ageless, could have been 30 or 300, with silver white hair and eyes that were completely black, no whites visible at all. Alpha King, she greeted Theron with a nod. Then those unsettling eyes fixed on me. And the marked one. I am Morgessa. I will break what should never have been forged. But I must warn you, this will hurt. The claim has had 10 years to root itself in your soul. Tearing it out will feel like dying. Will she survive? Theron's hand tightened on mine. If she's strong enough, if she wants freedom more than she fears pain. Morgessa moved closer, her nostrils flaring as she scented me. The claim is forced, as you suspected. Dominance sealed rather than consent sealed. That makes it both stronger and more brittle. It can be broken, but the breaking will be... She paused, searching for words. Absolute. Do it, I said before I could lose my nerve. Please, I want it gone. Morgessa smiled, revealing teeth that were just slightly too sharp. Then let us begin. She gestured to a stone slab in the center of the circle, and I realized with creeping horror that it was meant for me. Theron helped me climb onto it, the stone cold enough to burn even through my clothes. Morgessa began moving around the circle, lighting candles and chanting in a language that predated pacts and territories and civilization itself. "This will work better if you shift," the witch said conversationally. "The claim exists in both forms. We need to address both simultaneously." I hadn't shifted in years, hadn't dared to, afraid of what my Omega Wolf might do if given freedom. But I closed my eyes and reached for that buried part of myself, and she came surging forward with desperate eagerness. The transformation hurt less than I remembered, bones rearranging and fur sprouting, until I stood on 4 legs instead of 2. My wolf was small, pale gray, with those same 2 light eyes, unremarkable except for the mark on our shoulder, which glowed with sickly amber light. Cade's color, Cade's claim, Cade's ownership burned into our very essence. Morgessa placed her hands on either side of the mark and began to chant. The pain was immediate and all-consuming. It felt like she was reaching into my chest and tearing out my heart with bare hands. I tried to scream, but wolf throats don't make human sounds. What emerged was a howl of pure agony that echoed off the stone walls. Through the haze of pain, I felt Theron's presence, felt him shift and press his massive wolf form against mine, lending me strength. The mark began to burn. Not metaphorically, actual flames licking across my shoulder, consuming the scar tissue, eating away at the connection that had bound me to Cade for a decade. I could feel him on the other end of it, feel his confusion and then his pain as the bond began to sever. Part of me, the part that remembered being 18 and stupid enough to believe in heat-drunk promises, wanted to reach for him, to apologize, to soothe his hurt. But the rest of me, the part that had spent 10 years invisible and ashamed, reveled in his pain. Let him feel it. Let him understand what it was like to lose something precious. Let him burn the way I'd been burning for years. The flames intensified, and my howl became continuous, broken only by desperate gasps for air. Theron was whining, pressing closer, trying to anchor me to consciousness as Morgessa's magic dug deeper. I felt the moment the bond broke, a sensation like a cord snapping, like falling through space with nothing to catch me. Then there was only darkness, and the distant sound of Theron's wolf calling my name in a language older than words. I woke to silver eyes and the scent of cedar wrapping around me like a blanket. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or why my entire body felt like it had been shredded and poorly reassembled. Then, memory crashed back. The ritual, the flames, the sensation of something fundamental being torn from my soul. I tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, a whimper escaping before I could stop it. Easy. Theron's hand was on my shoulder, gentle but firm, easing me back down. I was in his bed, I realized, surrounded by furs and softness, and his scent saturating everything. You've been unconscious for 2 days. Morgessa said the breaking took more out of you than expected. 2 days. I lifted a shaking hand to my shoulder, feeling for the mark that had defined me for a decade. The skin was smooth beneath my fingers, unmarred except for the faintest trace of silver scarring. But it was mine now, just scar tissue, no longer pulsing with someone else's claim, no longer binding me to an alpha who'd never wanted me properly. It's gone, I whispered, and the words broke something open inside me. Tears came in a flood I couldn't control. 10 years of grief and rage and shame pouring out in racking sobs that shook my entire frame. Theron gathered me against his chest without hesitation, one hand stroking my hair while he murmured wordless comfort in a voice gone rough with emotion. "I know," he said when I could finally breathe again. "I know, little one. Let it out. Let it all out." So I did. I cried for the girl I'd been at 18, for the dreams I'd burned along with my sketchbooks, for every moment I'd made myself small and invisible to survive. I cried for Cade, too, for the alpha he might have been if he'd been braver, for the mate bond we could have shared if he hadn't been so terrified of what people would think. And I cried for myself now, standing on the precipice of something new and terrifying, free but uncertain what freedom actually meant. When the storm finally passed, I felt hollowed out but lighter somehow, as if tears had carved away the accumulated weight of years, leaving space for something new to grow. I pulled back from Theron's chest, wiping at my swollen eyes with the back of my hand. "Sorry," I mumbled. "I got your shirt all wet. I have others." His thumb brushed away a tear I'd missed. "How do you feel? And I mean really feel, not what you think I want to hear." I took inventory. My body ached everywhere, a bone-deep exhaustion that suggested I'd need days to fully recover. But underneath the physical discomfort was something else, a lightness, an absence of the constant low-grade anxiety that had been my companion for so long. I couldn't feel Cade anymore, couldn't sense him hovering at the edges of my consciousness like a disapproving ghost. The silence where his presence had been was shocking. "Empty," I said finally, but not in a bad way. More like I've been carrying a boulder for so long that I forgot what it felt like to stand up straight. Now it's gone and I'm not sure how to balance without it. Theron nodded slowly, his silver eyes searching my face. "Morgessa said that's normal. The mind and soul need time to adjust. She recommended rest, good food, and—" He paused, something uncertain flickering across his features. "Distance. From me. She said you need space to figure out who you are without any alpha's influence clouding your judgment." The suggestion should have been welcome, sensible even. But my wolf stirred sluggishly, whining her displeasure at the idea of Theron leaving. "And what do you think?" I asked. "I think she's right." His hand found mine, fingers lacing together. "I think you've spent 10 years being defined by Cade's rejection, and you need time to define yourself. I think rushing from his claim to mine would be trading one cage for another, even if this one has better accommodations." He raised our joined hands, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. "But I also think it's going to be the hardest thing I've ever done, giving you space when every instinct I have is screaming at me to keep you close." "How much space?" My voice came out smaller than intended. "As much as you need. I have a cottage on the eastern border of the territory, isolated, peaceful, with a garden that's been neglected but could be beautiful again with the right attention. It's yours for as long as you want it. Weeks, months, years if necessary." His jaw tightened. "I'll stay away unless you ask for me. Give you room to breathe and heal and figure out what you want without any alpha pressure." The offer was everything I should have wanted. Freedom, autonomy, space to discover who Isla was when she wasn't busy being someone's mistake or someone's mate. But the thought of being separated from Theron after everything we'd been through made my chest ache in ways that had nothing to do with the ritual's aftermath. "What if I don't want space?" The question emerged before I could overthink it. "What if I want to figure out who I am with you there? Not hovering or pressuring, but just present, available, part of the equation instead of separate from it." Theron went very still. "You don't have to say that because you think it's what I want to hear." "I'm not." I squeezed his hand, marshalling my thoughts. "I spent 10 years alone, Theron, isolated even when I was surrounded by pack. I know what solitude feels like, and it's not what I need right now. What I need is... I struggled to articulate something I was only beginning to understand. I need to learn how to exist with someone who sees me, who doesn't require me to shrink or hide or apologize. I need to figure out if what I'm feeling is real or just gratitude or some rebound instinct, and I can't do that if you're miles away. It might be harder with me close. His voice had gone rough. My wolf wants to claim you properly, mark you, mate you, bind you in ways that make Cade's forced claim look gentle. The only thing stopping me is knowing you need time. But if you're here, if I see you every day... He trailed off, but I could see the hunger in his eyes, the restraint that cost him. Then we'll navigate it together. I shifted, ignoring my body's protests, until I could cup his face in my hands. I'm not saying I want to rush into anything. I'm not even saying I'm ready for a mate bond or whatever comes next. But I am saying I want to try. With you. Not in isolation, but together. Isla. My name was a prayer and a warning. If we do this, if we try, you need to promise me something. What? Promise me you'll be honest. If you wake up one morning and realize this isn't what you want, if you feel pressured or trapped or like you're repeating old patterns, promise me you'll tell me. Even if you think it'll hurt me. Especially if you think it'll hurt me. His hands covered mine where they rested against his face. I would rather lose you to honesty than keep you through obligation. The promise felt weighty. Significant in ways I was only beginning to grasp. But I nodded. I promise, and you have to promise the same. If this stops feeling right, if you start seeing me as a burden or a responsibility instead of a choice, never. The word was fierce, absolute. But yes, I promise. Total honesty, even when it's hard. We sat there for a long moment, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air. This close, I could see the flecks of darker silver in his eyes, could count the faint scars crossing his face, evidence of a life lived dangerously, violently, but survived. He was beautiful in the way wild things were beautiful, all barely leashed power and lethal grace. I should let you rest, he said finally, starting to pull away. But I tightened my grip on his face, keeping him close. Stay. The word came out barely above a whisper. Please, just stay. You don't have to do anything. Don't have to say anything. Just be here. Something in his expression cracked, revealing the vulnerability beneath the Alpha King facade. Are you sure? Instead of answering, I shifted over in the massive bed, making room. Theron hesitated for only a heartbeat before climbing in beside me, moving with careful deliberation, as if I were something fragile that might shatter at rough handling. He settled onto his back, and I curled into his side, my head finding the hollow of his shoulder that seemed designed specifically for this purpose. His arm came around me, holding me close but not constraining. I could feel his heart beating against my cheek, steady and strong, and gradually my own pulse slowed to match it. My wolf, who'd been restless and uncertain since waking, finally settled with a contented sigh. Tell me something, I murmured into the comfortable silence. Something true that you've never told anyone else. Theron's chest rose and fell beneath my cheek as he considered. I'm terrified of failing you, he said finally. Of being another alpha who promises everything and delivers disappointment. I know I'm not Cade. No, I would never treat you the way he did. But what if I hurt you in different ways? What if being with me puts you in danger I can't protect you from? What if... His voice caught. What if you die because of me, like Lyra did? The raw vulnerability in his confession made my throat tight. I shifted enough to look up at him, finding those silver eyes shadowed with fear. You can't protect me from everything, and honestly, I don't want you to. I don't want to be something fragile you have to keep locked away for safekeeping. I want to be your partner, your equal, even if that means facing danger together. You say that now, but I say that always. I pressed my hand over his heart, feeling it thunder beneath my palm. Listen to me, Theron. I've spent 10 years being protected through isolation, being kept safe by being kept separate. It nearly destroyed me. Whatever comes next, whatever dangers or challenges or political nightmares your position brings, I want to face them at your side, not hidden away somewhere while you fight alone. You're absolutely sure? He searched my face as if looking for any hint of doubt. Because once you're mine, truly mine, not through challenge victory, but through choice, the other packs will see you as a target, a weakness they can exploit. Let them try. I surprised myself with the venom in my voice, with the fierce protectiveness my wolf felt not just for Theron, but for the future we might build together. I'm stronger than I look, stronger than I've let myself be, and I'm tired of making myself small to make other people comfortable. Theron's smile was slow and devastating. There she is, the woman I saw across that crowded hall, serving wine but standing like a queen, the one who didn't flinch when I called her mine in front of half the Northern Territories. He brushed a strand of hair from my face with infinite gentleness. I knew you were fierce underneath all that careful invisibility, knew you were extraordinary. I'm not, I started, but he pressed a finger to my lips, silencing me. You survived 10 years of emotional abuse with your kindness intact. You healed others even while you were wounded. You stood in a sacred clearing and watched 2 alphas fight to the death over you without falling apart. You endured a ritual that would have killed a weaker wolf and came out the other side still willing to risk your heart again. His finger traced my bottom lip before falling away. If that's not extraordinary, I don't know what is. I wanted to argue, to deflect the praise like I'd been trained to do. But something new was unfurling inside me. Not quite confidence, but the distant cousin of it. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, he was right. That I was more than my Omega status, more than Cade's mistake, more than the girl who'd learned to disappear. Ask me, I said suddenly. What you asked before, about whether I want to walk away once I'm healed. Theron tensed beneath me. You need more time to ask me. He was quiet for a long moment, gathering courage or resolve or both. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral, giving me space to answer honestly. Do you want to leave? Once you're recovered, once you've had time to process everything, do you want me to give you gold and protection and let you start over somewhere far from all of this? I didn't hesitate. No, I want to stay. I want to learn who I am in a place where I'm valued. I want to fill sketchbooks with wolves and moonlight and the expressions you make when you think no one's watching. I want to plant a garden and heal your pack members and maybe, eventually, learn what it means to be a Luna who wasn't forced into the role. I paused, my heart hammering. And I want to see where this thing between us leads, without rushing, without pressure, but with intention, with choice. The sound Theron made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. He rolled suddenly, pinning me beneath him, but keeping his weight off my still recovering body, his face hovering inches above mine. You're sure? Absolutely certain? Because if you choose me now, if you say yes to this, I'm never letting you go. I'll fight every alpha who looks at you wrong. I'll defend your honor to my dying breath. I'll love you so fiercely that the moon goddess herself will be jealous. Promise? The word came out breathless, anticipatory. Promise. He sealed it with a kiss that was gentle and reverent and full of barely restrained hunger. His lips moved against mine like he was learning my taste, memorizing the shape of my mouth beneath his. It was nothing like the desperate kiss in my tiny room. This was slower, deeper, weighted with significance. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. "I should let you rest," he murmured, without making any move to leave. "Morgessa would kill me if she knew I was keeping you awake." "Then don't tell her." I wrapped my arms around his neck, keeping him close. "Stay, please. I've spent enough nights alone." So he stayed, holding me while my body slowly remembered how to exist without pain, without shame, without the constant weight of someone else's rejection. We talked in whispers about everything and nothing: his childhood, my grandmother's teachings, the politics of pack alliances, the way starlight looked different in the mountains. And slowly, incrementally, I felt something new taking root where Cade's forced claim had once lived. Not love, not yet. It was too soon for that, too fresh after everything I'd survived. But the possibility of love, the space where love could grow if we tended it carefully, if we nurtured it with honesty and patience and the kind of fierce protection that came from genuine respect rather than possessive dominance. Over the following weeks, I healed, not just physically, though my body gradually recovered its strength, but deeper healing, the kind that came from waking up every morning and choosing to stay, choosing Theron, choosing myself. He kept his promise about the art supplies, presenting me with sketchbooks and charcoals and paints in colors I'd forgotten existed. I started drawing again, tentatively at first, then with increasing confidence. Wolves mid-hunt. The way shadow and light played across the valley. Theron's face when he thought I wasn't watching, his expression unguarded and achingly vulnerable. He introduced me to his pack, not as his mate, but as himself. Isla, healer and artist. Woman with her own identity separate from any alpha's claim. Some looked at me with suspicion, wondering why their king would bring home an Omega with such complicated history. But most welcomed me with genuine warmth, curious about the woman who'd captured Theron's legendary focus. Mara became something like the grandmother I'd lost, alternately fussing over me and delivering blunt truths I needed to hear. The betas in Theron's inner circle taught me self-defense, insisting that the Luna of Shadow Peak, even an unofficial one, needed to be able to protect herself. And slowly, so slowly I barely noticed it happening, the pack compound started feeling less like a place I was visiting and more like home. 3 months after the ritual, after I'd planted spring herbs in the neglected garden and filled 2 sketchbooks with observations of pack life, Theron found me sitting on the wall overlooking the valley. He climbed up beside me without asking, our shoulders touching companionably. "Tell me something," he said, echoing my words from that first night in his bed. "Something true." I leaned into his warmth, watching the sun set behind the mountains in shades of gold and amber and deep crimson. "I'm happy," I said simply. "For the first time in 10 years, I wake up and don't wish I were someone else, somewhere else. I'm happy." Theron's arm came around me, and when I looked up, his smile was radiant. "Good. That's good." He paused, then added carefully, "And the rest? How you feel about us?" I'd been expecting the question, had been turning it over in my mind for weeks. "I think I'm falling in love with you," I admitted. Slowly, carefully, without the rush of heat or forced bonds or desperate circumstances. Just choosing you every day, and finding that the choice gets easier instead of harder. Yeah? His voice had gone rough with emotion. Yeah. I turned in his arms, framing his face with my hands the way he'd done to me so many times. I'm not ready for a mate bond yet. Not ready to be marked or claimed or whatever comes with officially being yours. But I'm ready to admit that I want those things, eventually, when I'm sure it's not gratitude or rebound or trauma bonding, but actual, genuine, chose you because I can't imagine choosing anyone else love. I can wait. Theron's hands settled on my waist, his touch possessive, but not constraining. I've been waiting for you for years without knowing it. I can wait a little longer for you to be sure. We kissed as the sun set, painting the valley in colors that reminded me of fire and rebirth. And somewhere in the distance, I could have sworn I heard the mournful howl of a wolf who'd lost something irreplaceable. But it didn't hurt anymore. Cade's pain was his own to carry now, no longer my responsibility or burden. If you've made it this far, you're my people. Hit that like button, share this with someone who loves a good shifter romance, and subscribe for more stories that'll have you ugly crying at 2 a.m. You know you want to. I'd been the Alpha's mistake for 10 years, hidden and ashamed, and slowly suffocating under the weight of someone else's rejection. But now, sitting on a wall with silver eyes watching me like I held the secrets to the universe, I was becoming something new. Not a mistake, not a secret, not even really an omega in the diminished way I'd been taught to understand the word. Just Isla. Chosen, cherished, and finally, free to choose in return. And as Theron kissed me beneath the fading light, his scent of cedar and winter storms wrapping around me like a promise, I realized something profound. The rival king hadn't just smelled my scent and gone mad that night in the ceremonial hall. He'd recognized what I'd forgotten over 10 years of carefully maintained invisibility, that I was worth the madness, worth the fight, worth every risk and challenge and political nightmare that came with claiming me. The scent of my freedom, it turned out, was even more intoxicating than the bitter perfume of shame I'd worn for so long, and I would never hide it again.